Morning, everybody. Happy back to school day. Welcome to the news agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined later on by some spiders, warning you now, and also by the Mirror's assistant editor, Jason Beattie. Morning, Jason.
Morning, Susie.
So this is the People's Paper Review. Get into the comments, ask us your questions. We'll do our best to answer them for you. Those of you listening later on podcast will just have to ask yourselves why half-termers are even necessary, as I have been for the last fortnight. So what have we got for you today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on a world-first picture of the length of lead piping kept in a blood-soaked mailbag and found in the boot of Lord Lucan's car when he went missing in 1974, and which is believed to have been the murder weapon he used on Nanny Sandra Rivet. Now, that may seem like rather old news. It is 50 years old, but it's a fascinating read in the paper about how that picture came to be taken and why it's being produced now. I recommend searching it out and reading it. Now, inside the paper on page 2 is the story setting the domestic news agenda today, which is that Kier Starmer will today announce at an Interpol summit that he is doubling the money spent on tackling the small boat gangs to £150 million over 2 years. Now, Jason, smashing those gangs was part of his election pitch. And since he's been Prime Minister, the numbers of people crossing the channel and dying when their overloaded boats capsize has only increased. Is this going to work, do you think?
Well, that's a very good question, Susie. So the issue here is how much is performative and how much is going to make a difference. And the performative side is the politics side. So as you said, key election pledge were smash for gangs, as opposed to the Conservatives who were going to stop the boats. Yeah, probably smash the boats as well. So immigration amongst certain sectors of the population is a huge issue. Sometimes the way it's discussed, I think, lacks a general humanity, but we'll put that to the side for a moment. And the Conservatives, as I said, they had the Miranda scheme, which they insisted would be a deterrent. Labour decided that as a gimmick and got rid of it. But now Starmer, who is acutely aware of the political dangers of not being seen to be able to take action on what they call irregular immigration, is hosting this summit. Conveniently, this is an Interpol summit, first time it's been hosted in Britain for 50 years, which is over 150 countries, including Russia, bizarrely, is turning up for this Interpol summit in Glasgow. And then he's got a week of kind of immigration heavy news to kind of deliver, culminating in a trip to Hungary at the end of the week, where he's going to meet his new best friend, the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, who obviously, as we well known, has also taken a very hard stance on irregular migration. Now, will it work? That is a big question. I mean, as you say, the numbers of channel crossings are still going up. I think it's about, depending which figures you use, it's between 30,000 and 45,000 this year. And the deaths are continuing as well. Now Starmer is insistent that the best way to stop this is you smash the gangs, and rather than the offer the deterrent of the Miranda scheme. And I think he's probably actually right on this. There was no evidence that the Miranda scheme was going to prevent the people smugglers or people in desperate situations trying to come to this country The if you're willing to risk your life to get into a small boat and cross the channel at this time of year, when it's the sea is very, very cold, and can be quite rough, you're not going to be put off by the threat of being sent to a kind of hotel in Rwanda, are you?
No.
And actually, the real issue, which nobody seems to want to talk about, is not the deterrent, but the attraction. Why are they trying to come to Britain? And if you talk to the French, they will tell you the reason they're trying to come to Britain is actually we have incredibly kind of lax labour laws where it's very easy to get jobs in the black market, usually underpaid, exploitative jobs at that. We have no ID card system. And so you could argue that, yes, smashing the gangs ultimately could prove effective. It requires a lot of international cooperation. But we should maybe also look at kind of, trying to kind of remove some of the kind of the reasons, or try and tackle some of the reasons why so many people want to come here in the first place.
Yeah. What do you think, everybody? Do you think that a bit of extra money is going to make the difference? This is a multifaceted, very complicated thing that's causing lots of mass migration. There's climate change involved. There's failed states. There's politics behind it all. There's Brexit, of course, which means we can't send people back to Europe in the way that we did. Is a bit more money, is smashing the gangs better than smashing the boats? What do you feel that Kier's doing here? Is it performative, or is it something that's going to produce results? So Kier's pitch is going to be that this money is going to be spent on like a counter-terrorism style approach, right, which makes everyone look tough and hard. That helps too. So there's going to be state-of-the-art technology. They never have rubbish technology, do they? It's always state-of-the-art. Specialist investigators with a CPS order to fast-track people through the courts, as they did with the rioters over the summer. There'll be 300 more border staff and 100 intelligence officers for the National Crime Agency. They'll get adverts for the trade removed from social media, we're told, and even go to countries like Iraq and Vietnam, which are places of origin for many irregular migrants, to sort of stop them coming in the first place. Now, Jason, if the rest of the world can't stop people coming from a place of origin, which is an awful place to live for some reason, or to get trafficked to go somewhere else, and if the rest of the world can't get videos taken down off TikTok, unless they're the Chinese government, how is Kier going to do it?
Well, I mean, if this is the one area where Kier Starmer would say, he's got the experience and the expertise. As a former head of director of public prosecutions, head of the Crown Prosecution Service, he knows how to use the levers of the law to kind of actually kind of bring about results. And you could also point to his response to the riots in the summer, when again he actually moved very quickly and used the existing structures and mechanisms to kind of stamp out the kind of disturbances and uprisings across the country. So there's a case that if he gets this right, it may prove effective. But as you say, this is a multifaceted, incredibly complex issue, which, and it's not just about taking out the gangs. It's tackling at root these huge, complex problems. The United Nations estimates that the climate crisis alone over the next 50 years could see as many as 150 million. That's a conservative estimate. Some figures say 250 million displaced. Now, if you add war on top of that, so the majority of people who coming across the channel come from, there was a little blip last year when quite a few from Albania, but that's now been sorted. But the majority come from war-torn countries. They're coming from Syria, they're coming from Iraq, but they're coming from North Africa. So you add the problems there of suppression, civil war, on top of the climate crisis, and this is not, as you say, this is not just affecting the UK. We've got Germany putting in border controls for the first time because they're so concerned about it. it's a big issue in the US elections, which we'll come to in a minute. So there's a kind of one of the things which I find quite able to get my head around is there's a kind of disconnect between those who say we need tougher laws on immigration, and yet an unwillingness at the same time to confront the causes of
Well, exactly. The
people.
Conservatives would say, wouldn't they, that, you know, we must crack down on, there's too much immigration, there's too many people coming across the channel, there's too many people who come here legally on a visa and then overstay and get working in the black market and all the rest of it. But there's probably the Conservatives who are most against the idea of identity cards that, as you said earlier on, would crack down on some of that irregular employment issues and would help, of course, with tax take and revenue and probably being able to, you know, see who's working and get their taxes off them afterwards. They've, you know, how is Kier ever going to say, and bearing in mind the Labour Party really probably wouldn't like ID cards either, could they possibly get it through saying, well, we're doing this so that everyone has to have an ID card with a fingerprint on so that we know who's a migrant? Because that's going to...
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a growing head of steam behind the idea of ID cards. I mean, and I wouldn't be surprised if they had a no go introducing it. I mean, one of the interesting things about ID cards is actually the main opponents to it seem totally relaxed about the fact that Facebook, for instance, knows far more about me and holds far more information about me than an ID card ever would. Yet we willingly gave up this information by signing up to these social media sites.
Yeah, Apple's got my fingerprint because it's on my devices to open it. Yeah. So why would I have a problem with the government having it?
I know, and I do think that and I think one of the ironies is that Nick Clegg, who was one of the main opponents of ID cards, is now one of the most senior people in Meta, which has kind of harvest information in a way which he would have been appalled about if the government had done. But somehow it's better for a private company to be able to do this. I mean, again, that's an argument for perhaps for another day. So yes, I think there's those Labour MPs now who on the backbenches talking about ID cards is probably inevitable. I can see I can see the political argument for it, but whether how popular it would be, I don't know.
Yeah, Shalyn Hughes says they actually prove the point. You ain't getting me on an ID card and a fingerprint. Shalyn, do you have fingerprint recognition on any devices? You're on Facebook. You can go through the settings and download the information Facebook's got on you. You may be surprised to see how much they know. And of course, the reason that you see all those adverts on Facebook is because they know that's the stuff that you want to see. The thing is, I suppose, that Facebook's something you kind of opt into, even if you don't read all the small print, whereas with government, you don't have a choice. But, we have this, this was his pitch, wasn't it? This, like you said, this money going on, providing resources for more staff, but that doesn't magic them up. They've still got to come from somewhere. They have to be trained, they have to get to work, and they have to make it work. It will plainly, if it all goes well, still be the work of years to tackle something like small boats crisis, which spans the globe. Even if you brought in ID cards tomorrow, it would take several years to stop that. And although that's what he pitched on, because he had to in the election, really, that was the tone of the debate. The small boats are a really tiny part of our migration statistics, and not even the most illegal bit. It's the visa overstayers that are a bigger problem. Is he falling into the same trap, Starmer, that the Tories did, making a fuss about the tiny but obvious thing, while all the real issues that people might have, whether that is to do with visa overstayers, concerns about integration, or about effect on public services, that's all being ignored and not being dealt with because they're just dealing with this teeny tiny, like 1% of the problem over here?
Well, as I said, I think there's an element of performativeness here. I think but if he could be seen to say he's looking to take action, that kind of that kind of eases a bit of the pressure on. And I say this is quite interesting politically because it's obviously the key issue of reform. Reform are snapping at Labour's heels in some seats, but they're not a threat in many of the others. So it's not a kind of it's not the same picture right across the country. But Starmer and Labour are fully aware that if the government is not seen to be kind of taking action on this issue, it gives a very easy platform for the Conservatives and Reform. So that's kind of the background politics to it. As you say, when it comes to the difference between kind of irregular migration and legal migration, I mean, I can't stress this enough, Susie. We really need sometimes just to think about the people involved here. We kind of treat them as some kind of amorphous group. But these are individual stories, and they're often individual stories of incredible courage and heartache, and they are people who have fled some of the most appalling conditions we can imagine. And I think every time we talk about this issue, I kind of wish we could just sometimes remember more, but kind of the humanity about migrants as though they're some sort of kind of threat. As they forget about the contribution they can make, and two, the they bring with them an experience that most of us would never ever understand or go for ourselves.
Yeah, and also they've put their faith in us, haven't they? They trust Britain, they trust its reputation, and they think we're a country that is not like the one they've come from. That's literally why they want to be here. And they want to be in a place that's safe and reasonable and calm and has a decent cup of tea and all the rest of it, and things about these things.
And they want to repay the thanks for what we, the generosity we extended to them by giving them a home. And I think that's such an important point to make. I'm coming back to your other point about the regular migration. But I mean, the main reason that the right are able to kind of seize on this and blame migrants for everything is because they also at the same time fail to invest in the housing and the public services which people need and require. So they've kind of they've completely run down the public realm. They fail to build enough homes. They fail to, invest in education and health service, and then they turn around and go, "Oh, the reason you can't get a GP appointment because it's all the migrants' fault." It's the government's fault. They did this deliberately, and now they're looking for a scapegoat. And it's like people's concerns about migration lessen when the rest of the country is functioning better. It's not that difficult.
Yes, well, perhaps Kier's gambling it over time. It may change a bit, but of course, he's also talking. That's why he's talking to Interpol today. He's discussing migration as a national security threat, which doesn't help with the whole demonisation of people on small boats. If you're watching Kier now, moving on to the big story that's going to affect the international news agenda for the rest of the week, and if not, the next 4 or 5 years. Speaking of someone who makes a big fuss about immigration and is rather performative about it, tomorrow Donald Trump is finally going to shut up for maybe 5 minutes. Although early voting has been going on across the states, Tuesday is officially polling day, and the campaign trail will have to come to an end. Now, Jason, your Mirror Politics newsletter, which I can recommend people should subscribe to, has been featuring regular dispatches from our colleague Mikey Smith, who's in Philadelphia at the moment. Now, today, he says that Trump appears to be sort of near the end of his rope, really. While Kamala's still going strong after 100 days of whatever you think she's achieved, she's very successfully done a lot of fundraising and got herself into a position no one thought she would be in right at the start. Trump is rambling even more than usual. He's offering to use journalists as human shields, which of course I don't appreciate. He's threatening to turn the military on the American people. He's boasting of massive rallies, even as the cameraman sort of pans round and shows viewers just how many empty seats there are. I think we've got some footage of that, which we'll have a look at. But, it's hard to judge from here, of course. But how do you think the campaign has gone, and what do you think the result's going to be?
Oh, God, Susie, nobody knows. The only thing I do know is I have very little faith in American pollsters. I have not much faith in UK ones, but I have even less faith in American ones. There's talk of herding taking place. All the pollsters are kind of coming together to kind of produce similar results on the grounds that none of them want to be seen. We're going to be wrong. They want to be collectively wrong, which is not brilliant. It's incredibly difficult in a country of more than 300 million people anyway to kind of poll anything. It does come down to these few swing states. There was kind of some optimism in the Harris camp yesterday by kind of the polling in Iowa, which is usually solid Republican territory, that she was doing. I find it extraordinary that there are millions of Americans out there who are willing to vote for a convicted felon. They're willing to vote for somebody who was found liable in a court for sexual abuse. They're willing to vote for somebody who has said he would be a dictator, albeit only on day one. They're willing to vote for somebody who one of the most senior military officers in America has described as, quote, fascist to the core, unquotes. But they are willing to vote for somebody who praises Vladimir Putin, who is ambivalent about the war in Ukraine, who will rip up international treaties if necessary, who's going to weaken the American economy by imposing tariffs, who has no respect for minorities, who has talked about grabbing women, quotes, without is a serial. Do you want me to go on? I mean, and I still think this guy is acceptable to be leader of the most important office in the world.
Yeah, well, it does seem to be that it's very narrow. It's 50-50, it seems to be. But the early voting has put Kamala about 8 points ahead in some places. And it may well be that the later voting sort of removes some of that lead and it gets a bit closer. But it does also look like there have been some very big bets effectively placed in the financial markets and with bettors, with bookies, that kind of by Trump whales, as they're known, that go and make big money, 6-figure bets. And that actually shifts the odds, that starts making him look more like he's winning. And the polls started switching after that happened, because the polls saw what the betting markets were doing and the financial markets were doing. And also, the people started seeing what the bookies and the financial markets are doing, and they said, oh, Trump's apparently winning. He's doing quite well. And so therefore, their mood of him changes. And it all kind of gets influenced by other stuff. And it all comes in from outside. But I think it's more interesting what's going to happen after the result. So whatever happens when we have the result, which is going to take a few days, both sides are lawyered up to challenge the ballots just nationwide. The Republicans in particular have positioned supporters who think the 2020 election was stolen on local council committees, which have to ratify that vote. And so they refuse to do so. And that causes delays, more legal challenges. There's even movements for MAGA supporters to go online and challenge postal votes individually by saying that's not the right signature, because you've done it wrong, kind of thing, and get the whole thing thrown out again. It's December 16th when the new Congress, which of course may be of a party other than that of the presidential candidate who won, who has to ratify the presidential vote. Paul reckons Kamala will probably win the popular vote, but that doesn't count for anything, unfortunately not. Jason, can you see whenever Congress in December the 16th, they have to ratify the vote and say, well, this person's president. Can you see whoever wins that happening peacefully?
I mean, it really does depend which side wins. I mean, I think if Trump wins, and he's won kind of clearly, then I can see the Democrats kind of accepting the result. If Harris wins narrowly, then you can see that Trump will continue with his kind of concept that the election was stolen, as he did 4 years ago, and the fact that he has no respect for democracy is one of the most frightening aspects of the whole thing. But remember, he didn't accept the result last time. He tried to get it overthrown. He rang up. When that failed, he instigated a rebellion against the heart of democracy in America. And he shouldn't be anywhere near power.
He rang individual election officials, didn't he, in Georgia, and say, can you find me 11,000 votes? Yeah. That's what it would take to beat Joe Biden in Georgia. So, we've got this.
And so sorry, to answer your question, he's almost certainly going to do this again if he loses narrowly. And the damage this does to democracy is really very scary.
Now, Philo on Twitter says, do you think the loony left won't go full leftard when their latest puppet loses? I think Kamala will probably concede if she's definitely lost. She'll phone up and she'll go, well done, Donald. And then she'll go in the air and go, I concede defeat. Which, of course, Trump still hasn't done 4 years after losing last time. All right. So we're still waiting for him to concede in 2020. Jane on Twitter says, stop portraying Trump supporters as violent, mindless thugs when it's the Harris supporters who so far have been violent. Or have you forgotten about the assassination attempts? Stop scaremongering with bias stories and start telling the real new news. Well, yes, that Trump has had 2 assassination attempts, but it does seem to be MAGA supporters who stormed Congress in 2021. And no Democrats did that. We also had some early postal boxes, ballot boxes have been set on fire in Democratic districts, which would appear to be Republicans who are probably responsible for that, or at least Trump supporters. And there's quite a lot of registered Republicans, actually, who are saying they're voting for Kamala because she's over the issues of abortion, if nothing else. So, and a lot of this talk about the vote being stolen and the threat of violence, which is now, it's very much in the fore, I'm afraid, Jane. There's no way to say that it's not there. There is definitely a threat of violence if things don't go their way. That's been part of US elections for years, hasn't it, Jason? They've feared and distrusted the results of their votes. Going back to George Bush, Al Gore, hanging chads, there were riots in Florida over that. And before that even, they've got very complicated computer systems that are different everywhere, and there's lots of areas for it to go wrong. But Trump really ran with that idea, that kind of cultural idea that your votes can't be trusted. And he claims now that the only thing that will stop him winning is cheating on a massive scale. So he's he's laying the groundwork.
Yeah.
If he loses, to say, well, I haven't lost. It's just they stole it. Even if he loses by a massive margin, he will still say, I didn't. Even if, as last time, there's no evidence of anyone stealing it, he'll just say, I didn't lose, they definitely stole it. So people are prepared to believe that, whoever wins is going to lack that legitimacy. And that problem, what bills itself as the world's greatest democracy, it really undermines the government, doesn't it? I mean, Shalin says, if Trump loses, he will challenge. I think Kamala's probably going to challenge as well because it's that close. Should they just go back to pencils and bits of paper like we do?
I mean, what they really need
300 million
to do, Susie, is they need to have a complete overhaul of they need to have a complete overhaul of the American democratic system because it doesn't work. It really shouldn't be the case that a few thousand people in 5 or 6 states decide the outcome. I mean, coming back to Phil Bateman's point earlier about, Kamala will probably win the popular vote, just as Hillary did. That's not a democracy. It's not a democracy when you have a few thousand I think it's something like the way that the Senate is made up, that each state gets 2 senators. So California, with a population of over 30 million, gets the same as Wisconsin, which has a population similar to Lewisham, where I'm living. That is just ridiculous. And they have equal say in a Senate. This is the whole thing needs reappraising. The electoral college, the weighting of the vote, the way it gives disproportionate amount of power to states with smaller populations, which tend to be more right wing. This is not the sustainable for a thriving, healthy democracy. And nobody seems to want to question it or even think about how it could be improved so it becomes more representative. I mean,
it becomes more federal then, doesn't it? It becomes more a national way of doing things if they were to overhaul it, and that removes the power of individual states, which of course is how the country came together in the first place, and they don't want to lose their individual voices and all the rest of it. LB reckons that I think it was LB reckoned that Trump is going to lose. Chap, I can't remember his name, was talking about the orange man turd and that he's definitely going to lose. No one with a brain can vote for him after overturning Roe v. Wade. Of course, there's a whole situation with his Supreme Court appointments who have then gone and ruled that you cannot commit a crime if you do it while in office as president, if you wield your presidential power, it cannot later be called a crime. I think Trump would try and test that quite thoroughly if he did get in. Now we get to the big question, really. And I want you to answer this, everybody, as well. What do you think is going to happen if Trump loses? If the vote is ratified, it's definitely Kamala who won. There's no evidence of any problems. What will he and his supporters do? Do you think, Jason and viewers, do you think they're going to concede defeat and go quietly into the night and go, well, we gave it a good run, let's give up?
Well, your hope, Susie, is that, and I can't necessarily guarantee it will happen, your hope is that the cult will weaken if he loses, on the grounds that, ultimately people vote to be in power. And, he lost last time around. If he loses this time around again, he lost the midterms. This guy is becoming a serial political loser. And at that point, somebody in the Republican Party might want to say, well, look, what's the point of having this guy as our candidate again and again? I mean, he's already showing signs of God, how do we put this politely? I mean, he's bonkers. I mean, if you read any of the transcripts of his speeches, this is not the kind of the utterances of a sane man. So there's, but they've all worried about Biden's kind of fitness for office. I mean, I'm much more concerned about Trump's. If he loses this time around, in 4 years' time, he'd be even worse. I just can't. So at some point they have to go, look, this guy is not healthy for our country, he's not healthy for our party, and he's not delivering what we are there for, which is to win power. So you hope that would be the case. But it's become such a sect, such a MAGA, Make America Great Again. It's become such a kind of wacko style political outfit that you fear that it will continue. Maybe not necessarily with Trumpers, but maybe they'll turn to Barron or whatever he's called, or
JD Vance or something.
Yeah.
There may even be sort of a third party system sort of starting up with, if the Republicans become back to the centre ground and Trumpkins, as I think of them, go off and form their own little party. Paul says Trump will have the biggest sulk since Achilles in the Iliad. I think he's already had one of those, Paul, and goodness knows what he's going to do next. There's obviously a bit of a risk of quite a lot of conflict, I'd have thought, especially in a nation where they've got more guns than people. JC says they'll just be salty and angry and, of course, never admit defeat. Nothing bad will happen. They know the consequences. I hope you're right. But Casper says, I think both sides could be violent if they lose. Thank you, Casper. So that's the next question, the last one, really. What if Kamala loses? Right? What if America, even after they've witnessed an attempted coup and seen him found culpable in court of rape, tax evasion, defamation, a host of felonies and other federal crimes still yet to be considered, which may even come to court somehow while he's in office? What if they have chosen fairly unreasonably, despite the rest of the world going, what are you doing, to put him back in the high chair? What will he do if he's in office? I don't even want to think.
The thing is, we know, Susan, we know, because this time round he's been quite open about it. They last time there was some kind of like ambiguity about what he would do in office. This time he's been quite explicit. They are going to use the executive powers to basically fire tens of thousands of civil servants and appoint them with Republican officials. They are going to completely lean on the courts, so they become even more politicized. They are going to use the military and the National Guard to suppress any form of dissent. They are going to come after any of the media which they dislike. They've said all this. It's all written down. It's all there. So don't be shocked. So when they talk about, Trump being a fascist and Trump being a dictator, you're going to see the most illiberal democracy you've ever seen. Yeah. And it's very frightening. And that's even beyond we get to the kind of like the geopolitics stuff about what happens to Ukraine, what happens to NATO, what happens to the position of tariffs, whether it, whether he kind of gives succor to Putin and President Xi of China, the ripping up yet again of all the climate treaties, which might actually do something to prevent the world from burning. Don't even the repatriation of kind of tens of millions of what he would call illegal immigrants in America. This is that's the whole thing is kind of apocalyptically scary.
Yeah, I think firing tens of thousands of public servants on day one is also an invitation to crash your economy on day one, which will make all your other problems immensely worse, and cause America's problems to get worse. If you're worried about inflation now, start thinking about what happens if tens of thousands of people are suddenly out of work overnight. You're talking about the Dust Bowl again, and pretty grim. But if you really want to know, I think probably what's going to happen, or what might happen, what's at risk of happening, go and watch The Handmaid's Tale seasons 1 and 2, and you'll see that there's, they're talking about monitoring pregnancies. Even if a woman's having a miscarriage, she won't be allowed to abort a fetus, even if she's been raped, and they're going to monitor pregnancies, which is astonishing, frankly. Now, we have to wait and see, of course, how that all pans out. But like I said, the first few days, we'll find out whether I think we'll find out who's won, but I think we'll find out where the disputes are, where the states are that will be the pivotal bits, because that will be where all the legal challenges start kicking off. And it'll be December the 16th before we can expect the vote to be ratified. But that will be ratified by a Congress which has also got voted in on the same day. And it is entirely possible that someone has voted for one person to be their president and the other party to be their congressman and their senators, because they want to control the president because they don't trust them in some way. And then you end up with chaos. Please, America, sort it out. Anyway, we have got, well, we're going to call this good news. It's not really good news if you're me. I'm going to do it with my eyes shut, I think. But here it is. Now, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know why this is good news. And if it was any other animal, I would be choosing it. So principles mean I have to choose this as today's good news. A zoo has helped to breed tens of thousands of endangered fen raft spiders, which were at risk of dying out. Chester Zoo started breeding babies in test tubes and hand feeding them flies. Good God! Then releasing them into the wild, and they've announced there are now more than 10,000 breeding females, and the species has been saved from extinction, which apparently is something we can be happy about. Now, despite the fact these things are 7 centimeters across, the one good thing is that they actually catch and eat other spiders. So as long as they eat more than you're making, that's good. Now, set a thief to catch a thief and all that. Jason, is this proof that if you put some thought and time and effort into things which seem terribly grisly and unnecessary, that nature can be given a helping hand, even if sometimes you would rather hit it with a slipper? For goodness sake, take that picture off my screen.
Why are you so scared of spiders, Susie?
They've got too many eyes. Too many eyes, too many legs, and it's just unnecessary. Sorry. No.
Yeah.
I can deal with lots of things. I can deal with the last person in the newsroom and the Ministry of Defence and God knows what else. It's a slipper for those buggers. I don't care if they are endangered. But is this proof that, sometimes humans can give nature a helping hand and things will all work out for the best? Maybe.
Yeah, I think it is. The problem is that the most interesting bits of nature, which is kind of like things like fungi and insects, etc., are also the most grisly and ugly things to see. So we never get nature programs about them. We get nature programs about cute, cuddly mammals with kind of little fur and big eyes, and But spiders, they're part of it. They're part of the ecosystem. We need them.
Apparently they perform a function, but like I said, if this had been a story about endangered little fluffy things that they'd bred thousands of and they were saved from extinction, I would have done this as good news. So I had to stick to my principles today, but it was difficult, and I'm sorry.
You've been very brave, Susie. You've been very, very brave.
Well, thank you. All those arachnophobes out there who've seen spiders on their screens today, I'm sorry, but we had to do it. Right. Thank you, Jason, for taking us through all that. Thank you, everyone, for taking part. We'll be back again on Wednesday at noon for a special US election news agenda. Mikey will be joining us from the States, hopefully with his, bulletproof vest and his flak jacket and his big helmet on, and telling us how it's off over there. So join us for that noon on Wednesday. Until then, everybody, stay safe, take care. Tatty bye.